When an officer asks where you are coming from, it may sound casual, but it is rarely just conversation. It often serves as a setup question, and the answer can shift a simple stop into something more serious like a search, a driving impairment check, or even a criminal investigation. In this context, there is a key phrase that many people use without thinking, and that can unintentionally open the door to more scrutiny than they expect. The goal here is not conflict, but control over what you say and what you do not say. A lawyer named Mark Lopez, who works in criminal defense, explains that he has reviewed thousands of police reports. From that experience, he says this question is one of the most frequent ways people end up giving information that later works against them. To understand it, you first need to see why it is asked at all. In police practice, where are you coming from can function in several ways. First, it helps them construct a timeline. If someone responds that they came from a friend's house, the next questions often follow immediately. Which friend? How long were you there? Did you consume alcohol? At that point, a simple answer is turned into a detailed account that can later be checked for inconsistencies. Second, it creates a location link. Mentioning a bar or similar place can quickly steer the interaction towards suspicion of impaired driving. Even naming certain areas can lead officers to interpret the situation through a lens of risk or criminal activity. Third, it works as a psychological pressure test. Many people, when nervous, tend to speak more than necessary. Every extra detail becomes something the officer can record and compare later. If details do not fully align, it can create further suspicion. The key point is that you're not required to build their narrative for them. You're not obligated to explain your movements in detail during initial roadside questioning. A commonly suggested response is designed to be calm, minimal, and non-confrontational. The idea is to remain cooperative while limiting unnecessary disclosure. In simple terms, it communicates that you're willing to provide required documents such as your license, registration, and insurance, but you're choosing not to discuss your activities or timeline. Said in a respectful tone, it sets a boundary without escalating tension. It avoids extra explanation, avoids emotional reaction, and avoids adding details that could be misinterpreted later. This approach works because it balances three things at once. It shows compliance with what you must legally provide. It makes clear where you are drawing the line. And it reduces the chance of saying something in the moment that could later be used against you. During a traffic stop, questioning is generally allowed before formal rights warnings apply, and courts have accepted that practice in many situations. Police officers may also ask questions like whether there is anything in the vehicle they should be aware of, where you are coming from, or whether there are any guns, drugs, or other illegal items present. These questions often come in rapid succession and can sound routine, but they are designed to draw out information. In many police reports, people respond too openly. Some admit to having marijuana in the car. Others mention firearms that may not be properly disclosed. Once that information is spoken, the situation can change immediately, even if there was no initial reason for suspicion. What begins as a standard stop can turn into detention or arrest. Because of this, the recommendation is not to rely on Miranda rights as a protection strategy during the initial interaction. The focus is on controlling your own statements from the start. A simple practice scenario helps illustrate how this plays out. If an officer asks where you are coming from, a minimal response is given while still providing required documents such as license, registration, and insurance. The goal is to avoid detailed explanations about your movements. If the officer follows up by asking whether you are refusing to answer, the response remains steady and non-confrontational. It simply asserts that you are not discussing your day while still complying with document requests. If asked whether you have consumed alcohol, the same approach is used. No elaboration, no story, no expansion of details. If asked where you are going, the response remains unchanged, keeping the same boundary in place without escalation. The purpose of this method is not argument. It is not resistance. It is simply avoiding contributing additional information that could later be used to build a case. Three common mistakes repeatedly appear in these situations. The first is overdisclosure. Many people try to be fully transparent and end up providing details, such as where they came from, what they drank, or how much they consumed. Even small admissions can become key evidence in a report. A single statement can lead to further testing, field evaluations, or additional investigation, even when there was no initial cause for concern. The second mistake is excessive talking. Nervousness often leads to long explanations. More words create more data points. Those details can later be compared and scrutinized. Any inconsistency, even minor, may be interpreted as suspicion. People who naturally talk a lot are especially at risk of unintentionally expanding the interaction beyond what is necessary. The third mistake is sarcasm or joking. Responses like dismissive comments or attempts at humor may feel natural in the moment, but they can increase tension. Even if the intent is harmless, it can shift the tone of the encounter. Staying calm and neutral is more effective than trying to be clever or funny. In situations where the questioning continues or becomes more forceful, a final boundary is used. If asked why you're not answering or what you're hiding, the response remains consistent and formal, stating that you are invoking your right to remain silent. When an officer continues the questioning, a key phrase is used: "Am I free to go?" If the questioning repeats, this question can be asked again as a way to clarify whether the detention is still active. In practice, officers may become frustrated when rights are asserted, but the purpose is to apply constitutional protections rather than debate them on the roadside. This approach works as a pressure release point. It is not about arguing legal theory in the moment. It serves two functions. It asserts the right to remain silent, and it checks whether the stop is still ongoing or has ended. In some cases, the officer may still continue the process related to the traffic stop, but the purpose of extended questioning is effectively limited. There is also an important distinction depending on location and law. In certain jurisdictions, there are situations known as stop and ID states, where individuals may be required to identify themselves during specific detentions. The legal requirements vary, and understanding local law is necessary. For example, in Indiana, there is no stop and ID requirement in general. However, during a traffic or ordinance violation stop, failure to provide required information such as name, address, or date of birth can itself become a separate offense. This means the rules depend heavily on the state and the type of stop. In general terms, when driving, identification, license, and registration must be provided when requested. Claims related to a right to travel are not accepted in this context. The practical approach is simple. Provide only the required identification and documents. Do not expand into narrative explanations. Avoid volunteering extra details beyond what is legally necessary. Certain physical behaviors also matter during the interaction. Hands should remain visible on the steering wheel. Windows should be lowered enough to allow clear communication. Movements should be slow and deliberate, and any action should be announced in advance, such as reaching for a wallet. Consent to searches should not be volunteered, as that is a separate legal matter. Repeating the same calm and consistent responses helps maintain control of the interaction without escalation. The overall objective in any police encounter is not to win an argument. The objective is to conclude the interaction without providing unnecessary information that could be used as evidence later. To summarize, when asked where you are coming from, the response is to decline discussion of personal details while providing license, registration, and insurance. If pressure continues, the response shifts to asserting the right to remain silent and asking whether you are free to go. The principle remains consistent throughout. The final message emphasizes the same position clearly. Always invoke the right to remain silent.